The restaurant was softly lit, with warm lights and candles scattered across the tables, creating a romantic atmosphere that contrasted with the emptiness Emma felt as she glanced at the clock for the third time. The date, marked months in advance, was special, 10 years of marriage with Ka. But he wasn't there. She shifted in her chair for the fourth time, adjusting the red dress she had chosen with such care. She had thought of every detail of that night, wanting it to be perfect. Emma's eyes wandered around the room, where other couples chatted and laughed. The background music, a soft piano melody, now felt uncomfortably loud, filling the silence in the space where Ka should have been. The waiter had passed by 3 times asking if she wanted to order anything, and each time she responded with a forced smile, still waiting. But Ka was late. Again. Feeling a knot forming in her stomach, Emma picked up her phone and checked her messages. No response. Anxiety began to morph into anger. This wasn't unusual. Over the past few months, he had been getting later and later, and the excuses seemed more rehearsed each time. Work, traffic, last-minute commitments. Emma forced herself to believe it, because there was no room for another possibility. After all, they had been together for 10 years, and she always believed that the love they shared was strong enough to overcome anything. Finally, she spotted him. Ka entered the restaurant, hurriedly scanning the room until he found her. He was wearing the same clothes he had put on for work earlier, but something in his expression wasn't familiar to Emma. It was as if he had been caught off guard, as if he wasn't entirely present there. She watched as he approached, trying to suppress the pain that was growing in her chest. "Sorry, love. I had a meeting that ran late," he said, leaning in to kiss her. The kiss was cold, mechanical. Something was wrong. A meeting? Emma tried to keep her voice neutral, but resentment seeped through. She looked at him with penetrating eyes, searching for answers beyond his words. Ka sighed, fiddling with a napkin on the table. "Yeah, you know how it is, a lot of work, a lot of pressure. I tried to leave early, but—" "You always try to leave early," she interrupted, unable to contain the biting tone. "But lately, it seems like you're always late." He looked away, something he hadn't done before. Ka's relaxed demeanor was gone. He was tense, uncomfortable. Emma took a deep breath, sensing that she was on the verge of a discovery that could change everything. There was something she didn't want to admit to herself, but the truth felt closer than ever, suffocating. "Ka, what's happening?" she asked directly, dropping the facade of calm. "Don't tell me it's just work. I know you. Something has changed. I can feel it." For a moment, he remained silent, his eyes fixed on the menu as if trying to find a way to escape. The moment dragged on, and Emma felt her heart pounding in her chest. Finally, he raised his eyes to hers, and Emma recognized something she never expected to see: guilt. "Emma, I didn't want it to be like this," he began hesitantly. "I need to tell you something." The words had barely left his mouth, but Emma already knew. The intuition she had been ignoring for months now confirmed itself with every hesitation from Ka. A wave of nausea hit her, and everything around her seemed to slow down. She felt the blood drain from her face, and her hands began to tremble. "Ka, what did you do?" Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but filled with a pain she had never experienced. He took a deep breath, avoiding her gaze. "I didn't want to hurt you. I never did. But there's someone." Emma froze. The words felt distant, echoing in her mind, unable to fully penetrate her understanding. "Someone? What do you? Who?" She already knew, but something inside her pleaded to be wrong. "It's Scarlett, and she's pregnant." Emma's world crumbled in that instant. Scarlett, her best friend. It couldn't be. She tried to absorb the information, but it was as if her brain refused to process the double betrayal standing before her. She tasted the bitter bile in her throat, and the restaurant, once so beautiful and inviting, now felt like a suffocating scene from a reality she couldn't accept. "Scarlett's." Her voice came out louder than she intended, attracting glances from the tables around them. But she didn't care. "You're having an affair with Scarlett?" Ka didn't answer. He simply lowered his head, the expression of defeat evident. Emma felt a mixture of rage and despair. Tears burned in her eyes, but she didn't want to cry. Not there. Not in front of him. She stood up abruptly, feeling an urgent need to escape, to flee that nightmare. But before she left, she looked at Ka one last time, her voice heavy with pain.
10 years, Ka.
10 years, and this is how it ends. Without waiting for a response, Emma left the restaurant, leaving behind not just the celebration that never happened, but also a life that, until that moment, she believed was real. The restaurant door closed behind Emma, muffling the chatter from the dining room and the soft music, but nothing could silence the whirlwind in her mind. She walked briskly down the sidewalk, feeling the cold of the night on her face and in her trembling hands. Her heels clicked on the pavement like an echo of her chaotic thoughts, repeating just one word: Scarlett. Her best friend. The person with whom she had shared her deepest secrets and most vulnerable moments. And now, Scarlett was the reason her marriage was crumbling. It was surreal. How could something like this happen without her realizing it? Emma felt her phone vibrate in her bag.
She knew it was Ka.
He was probably desperately trying to fix the situation, but at that moment, Emma didn't want to hear anything. She picked up the device, looked at his name on the screen, and, in a surge of anger, tossed the phone back into her bag without answering. As she walked aimlessly, her mind kept drifting back to Scarlett. They had met in college and become inseparable. They had shared so many moments together: the college parties, sleepless nights studying for exams, their first jobs. Scarlett was one of the few people Emma trusted completely. The last person she would expect betrayal from. Yet betrayal had happened. And it wasn't just physical. It was a breach of trust, a devastating blow to everything she believed about friendship, marriage, and love. At some point, Emma found herself standing in front of the building where Scarlett lived. Without realizing it, her feet had carried her there, as if her mind already knew what to do, even though her heart was still shattered. She looked up at the illuminated window of Scarlett's apartment. A small part of Emma just wanted to run away, go home, and bury herself in her own pain. But another part, stronger, needed answers. She needed to hear from Scarlett what had happened. She needed to confront her. Without a second thought, Emma entered the building, her hands shaking as she pressed the elevator button. The ride was quick, but for her, it felt like an eternity. When the doors opened on Scarlett's floor, Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Each step toward the door felt harder than the last, but she wouldn't stop now. She needed to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Arriving at the door, she hesitated for a moment before knocking. There was no immediate response, but Emma could hear voices from the other side, and that only fueled her anger further. She knocked again, this time harder. After a few seconds, the door opened. There stood Scarlett, with a surprised look that quickly morphed into something more, a mix of guilt and discomfort. "Emma, I didn't know you were coming," Scarlett said, her voice trembling, as if she already knew what was about to happen. "You knew I would come, Scarlett. You knew this was going to happen sooner or later," Emma replied, her voice heavy with pain, her eyes fixed on Scarlett's, waiting for her to say something that would explain the inexplicable. Scarlett hesitated, seeming to search for the right words. "Emma, I'm so sorry. I never wanted things to get to this point, but they have," Emma shot back. "You slept with my husband, Scarlett. With Ka.
How could you do this to me?"
"To our friendship? I trusted you. I told you everything about my marriage, about the problems, and you just took advantage of that." Scarlett took a deep breath, her eyes filled with regret, but there was also something defensive in her posture. "It wasn't like that, Emma. I know there's no justification for what happened, but it wasn't something that we planned. It just happened, and I don't know how to explain." Emma laughed, but it was a bitter laugh, full of disbelief. "You don't know how to explain? You two got involved, Scarlett. You destroyed my marriage, and you don't know how to explain? I've known you for years. I trusted you. And now you tell me it just happened?" Scarlett fell silent for a moment, as if weighing her words. "Emma, I never wanted to hurt you. It started in a confusing way, and before I knew it, we were involved. But it's not what you're thinking. It wasn't premeditated. It wasn't out of revenge or hate. We just grew close. Emma took a step forward, the anger building inside her like an unstoppable tide. Grew close? How do you have the nerve to say that to my face? As if it were normal. You grew close to the man I've spent the last 10 years of my life with. Scarlett, you destroyed everything. There's no going back from this. Scarlett's gaze faltered, and she bit her lip, fighting back tears. I know, Emma. I know I ruined everything, and
I'm so sorry.
I have nothing else to say beyond that. I'm so sorry. Emma looked at the woman in front of her, someone who just days ago had been a figure of trust and support in her life, and now was turning into the embodiment of her greatest pain. She felt a tightness in her chest, as if she were losing her breath. The betrayal was overwhelming, and Scarlett's words of apology sounded hollow, insufficient to mend the damage. Do you think apologies will fix anything? Emma's voice was low, but laden with hurt. You too destroyed my marriage. You destroyed our friendship. And now what's left? What do I do with this? Scarlett didn't answer. There was nothing to say at that moment. The silence between them was deafening, each second weighing like an eternity. Finally, Emma took a step back, shaking her head. I don't know if I'll ever forgive you, Scarlett. And honestly, I don't even know if I want to. With those words, Emma turned and left the apartment, feeling as if she were leaving behind more than just a friend. She was leaving a part of her life, a piece of herself that had been brutally ripped away. Now, all that remained was the pain, and Emma didn't know how she would survive it. The walk back home, that night, felt endless. Emma felt numb, unable to fully process the pain that now engulfed every part of her being. The cold wind cut against her face, but nothing compared to the chill growing in her chest. She questioned how something that once felt so solid, her marriage, her friendship, could have crumbled so brutally. It was as if everything had been built on sand. When she finally arrived home, she stopped in front of the door, staring at it as if it were an impenetrable barrier. Inside was Ka, the man with whom she had shared a decade of her life, with whom she had built memories, dreams, plans. The man who had betrayed her. Still, Emma knew they needed to talk. She couldn't avoid the confrontation. Not anymore. She turned the key in the lock, pushing the door open firmly. As she entered, she was hit by the familiar smell of home. The scent that used to comfort her now felt bittersweet. Ka was sitting on the living room sofa, his hands nervously intertwined. He stood up as soon as he saw her, his face tense and marked by guilt. Emma closed the door behind her, the anger and hurt still simmering beneath the surface of her controlled expression. Emma, Ka started, but she cut him off before he could continue. I talked to her, Emma said, her voice steady but laden with pain. I went to see Scarlett. Ka's face contorted, as if he had been struck. He ran a hand through his hair, nervous, unsure how to react. I'm so sorry, Emma. I know there are no words that can fix this, but do you have any idea what you've done? Emma stepped forward, her anger now escaping her control. You destroyed everything. This wasn't just an affair, Ka. You didn't just ruin our marriage. You destroyed my trust in you, my trust in her. You both betrayed me in the worst way possible. Ka lowered his head, his hands trembling as he tried to find the right words. I know I was wrong. It was a terrible mistake. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. Emma laughed bitterly, her eyes locked on his. Don't play the victim, Ka. You knew exactly what you were doing when you got involved with her. How long has this been going on? How long have you both been deceiving me? He hesitated, which only made things worse. Emma saw the answer in his eyes, the one she dreaded. Months, he finally said. For a few months, the words hit Emma like knives to her heart. Months. All that time, while she was trying to hold the marriage together, while she believed his work delays and excuses were real, Ka was with her best friend. The months unfolded in her mind like a continuous nightmare, the lonely nights waiting for him to return, the flimsy excuses, the moments when Scarlett seemed distant or nervous. Everything now made cruel sense. Months, Emma repeated, her voice almost a whisper. You betrayed me for months and still had the audacity to come home and look me in the eye as if nothing was happening.
I
was confused, Emma, he replied, his voice desperate. I never wanted to hurt you. You have to believe me. Emma laughed, incredulous. Confused? Confused is what you feel when you can't decide between pizza or a burger for dinner, Ka. This is pure cowardice. You weren't confused. You chose to do this. You chose to betray our marriage, our life together. Ka fell silent, his eyes welling with tears he was trying to hold back. Emma, however, felt no pity. The pain she carried now was greater than any remorse he could show. She needed to understand why. She needed answers, even if each one destroyed her a little more. Why, Ka? What did I do wrong? What led you to this? She asked, almost pleading for an explanation that would at least make the unbearable understandable. It wasn't you, Emma, he quickly responded, his voice filled with remorse. You did nothing wrong. I felt lost. The work, the pressure, and I started to pull away. Scarlett was there. She listened to me, supported me, and before I knew it, I had gone too far. Oh, of course, Emma replied with cutting sarcasm. She listened to you, supported you, and you decided that justified destroying everything we built together. Ka looked down, unable to face Emma's devastated gaze. She hoped the guilt he felt would be enough for him to realize what he had done, but nothing could undo the damage. Nothing could restore what had been broken. I loved you, Emma said, her voice now soft, almost a lament. I loved you with everything I had, Ka. And even with the problems we had, I always believed our love was strong enough to overcome anything. But you ruined everything. Ka began to step closer, reaching out a hand to touch her, but Emma recoiled, her expression hardening again. No, she said firmly. Don't touch me. You have no right. He stopped, his eyes full of despair. Emma, I know I messed everything up. I know. But please, give me a chance to fix this. We can get through this. I still love you. She shook her head slowly, tears finally streaming down her face. Get through this? Ka, how do you think we can get through this? You broke something inside me that can't be fixed. There's no going back. Ka collapsed onto the sofa, his head in his hands, as if he finally understood what he had done. Emma looked at him, the man she once knew so well, who now felt like a stranger. She knew, in that moment, that their marriage was over. There was nothing left to save. With a deep sigh, Emma turned toward the stairs leading to their bedroom. I'm going to pack my things. Tomorrow I'm leaving. Ka got up, his voice filled with panic. Emma, no. Please. We can. No. She cut him off firm. It's over, Ka. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. Without looking back, Emma climbed the stairs. Each step was painful, as if gravity were trying to pull her back. But she knew she needed to move forward, even if she still didn't know how. As she began to gather her things, Emma felt the weight of the separation slowly settle on her shoulders. 10 years of memories, hopes, and dreams shattered in one night. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear. The life she knew had ended there. The morning was gray when Emma woke up on the living room sofa, her body stiff and her mind in a confused haze. The previous night had been long, filled with hurriedly packing bags and silent tears. She had spent hours trying to process the devastation that was Ka's betrayal, finding no solace. The apartment now felt like a strange place. The air was heavy, suffocating, as if everything around was saturated with the lies Ka and Scarlett had shared. Emma could barely breathe in that environment. The photos of the two of them, scattered across the shelves, now seemed to mock her. Frozen moments of happiness that now felt false, empty. Ka wasn't home when she woke up. He had likely left early to avoid another confrontation. Perhaps he also knew it was better not to be there when Emma left. She looked at the packed bags by the door, her heart tightening with the reality that was sinking in. It was the end. There was nothing left to save. Emma took one last look around the house. Every object there carried a memory, a piece of the life she had built with Ka. But now, everything felt hollow, as if there were no longer any meaning in staying there. She grabbed her keys, but before leaving, an impulse led her to walk to their bedroom. The bedroom, once a refuge, was steeped in an air of abandonment. The unmade bed, Ka's familiar scent still lingering on the pillows, symbolized the life she was leaving behind. Emma approached the bed, sitting on its edge, her eyes scanning the room. This was where they had shared dreams, intimate conversations, and laughter. Now, it all felt like a part of another life. She opened Ka's nightstand drawer. Inside, she found a photo of the two of them, taken years ago on a trip to Tuscany. They were smiling, embracing, happy. Emma wondered when that genuine smile had disappeared. When did he start lying to her, to himself? She placed the photo back and closed the drawer with a determined motion. There was no more room for regrets, for trying to understand where it all went wrong. It was time to move on, no matter how painful that might be. Emma stood up, grabbed her bags, and left the apartment, closing the door behind her with a sigh. As she descended the building stairs, it felt like each step was a farewell to her old life. Each stair took her farther away from the man she loved, but also closer to something new, something she still couldn't see. In the parking lot, Emma opened the trunk of her car and placed her bags inside. As she got into the vehicle, she took one last look at the building. The pain was still there, overwhelming, but she knew she had to go. There was nothing left for her there. Driving through the city, the traffic seemed to move in slow motion, while her mind wandered to what would come next. She knew she couldn't go back to Ka's apartment, but she also didn't know where to go. Her family lived far away, and the friends she trusted seemed to dwindle to a few names, as Scarlett's betrayal had also destroyed the pillar of support she had always considered unshakable. The pain of losing not only her husband but also her friend was overwhelming. Everything Emma had taken for granted was crumbling, and the feeling of abandonment enveloped her like a dense cloud. There was no home. There was no security. What remained? She decided to drive to a hotel where she could spend the next few nights until she figured out a solution. She parked in front of a small hotel downtown and, with difficulty, dragged her bags to the lobby. The receptionist seemed friendly, but Emma barely noticed his polite smile as he checked her in. She went up to her room, feeling exhausted in a way that went far beyond the physical. The hotel room was small and simple, with a single bed and a table against the wall. Emma left her bags by the bed and collapsed onto the mattress, staring at the ceiling for a long time. The pain felt like a constant, crushing presence. It was as if she were trying to breathe in an airless environment. For hours, Emma remained there, motionless, immersed in the emptiness that now seemed to be a part of her existence. She was alone in a way she had never experienced before. When she finally got up, she went to the window and looked out at the city below, watching people come and go, oblivious to her pain. Her phone vibrating in her bag pulled Emma from her thoughts. She hesitated before reaching for it. There were dozens of unread messages, most from Ka. Each notification felt like a cruel reminder of everything that had been destroyed. Emma sighed and finally opened the most recent message. "We need to talk. I know you're hurt, but please let me explain. I don't want to lose you." A hot rage welled up inside Emma. Audacity. After everything he had done, he wanted her to listen to explanations, as if words could erase what had happened. She blocked his number. There was nothing left to say. Night fell, and the small hotel room became Emma's only refuge. She sat on the edge of the bed, hugging herself, trying to understand how to move forward when everything felt lost. The future now was a blank canvas, a canvas she didn't know how to fill. Without a job, without a place to call home, and with her soul shattered, Emma was adrift, lost in a sea of uncertainties. She knew she needed to move on, find a way to rebuild her life. But at that moment, all she could feel was the crushing weight of failure, betrayal, and loneliness. As silent tears rolled down her face, Emma finally understood the magnitude of the rupture she was experiencing. It wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the end of a part of her life, and the pain of it consumed her. Yet deep down, Somewhere inside her, a small spark of hope began to emerge. She knew the pain wouldn't last forever. Somehow, at some point, she would find a way to move forward. The first sound Emma heard when she woke up was the low hum of the air conditioner in the hotel room. The pale morning light filtered through the half-drawn curtains, and she blinked slowly, adjusting to the new day. She was still lying down, her body heavy, as if the night had barely provided enough rest. The pain, though less acute, was still there, a constant presence that made every movement feel like an immense effort. When she finally got up, the mirror in the room reflected an image Emma barely recognized. Her eyes were sunken, her skin pale and tired, her hair disheveled. She looked away, as if avoiding her own reflection could somehow distance her from the pain she carried. With slow steps, she picked up her phone from the bedside table and saw a few new messages. Some were from friends, checking in to see how she was, offering support, messages she still didn't know how to respond to. But what really caught her attention was a notification for an email. It was from her office. Emma opened the email, feeling a chill in her stomach. The subject line left no room for doubt. Urgent meeting request. Her supervisor, Paula, was asking Emma to come to the office that morning to discuss her situation. A wave of panic washed over her. The last month at work had been complicated. Ever since she started suspecting Ka's betrayal, her productivity had dropped significantly. She had isolated herself, began making mistakes in reports, and missed important deadlines. Now, it seemed the company had run out of patience. Emma knew she wasn't in a condition to face this, but she also knew that running away would only prolong the inevitable. She needed to deal with the meeting, with the same determination she faced the end of her marriage, or at least try. After a quick shower, she put on the first outfit she found, a simple, sober ensemble. When she looked at her reflection again, she took a deep breath. She didn't feel strong, but at that moment, that didn't matter. All that mattered was moving forward. The office was a few blocks from the hotel, and the short walk there was silent and filled with apprehension. Emma forced herself to focus on just the next step, momentarily pushing away the painful memories of the night before. When she arrived at the company's reception, she was greeted with cordial smiles, but there was a strange atmosphere in the air, as if everyone knew what was about to happen. Paula was waiting for her in a small meeting room, and upon seeing her, her supervisor's expression was restrained, perhaps even awkward. Paula had always been professional, but she also had a certain empathy for her employees. She was a strong woman with a commanding presence, and that morning was no different, though her posture seemed more rigid. "Emma, please take a seat," Paula said, gesturing to the chair in front of the table. Emma sat down, her heart racing, trying to stay calm. Paula pulled a file in front of her, and the first few seconds of silence felt like an eternity. Emma knew what was coming, but that didn't make it any easier. "I know you've been going through a tough time," Paula began, her voice low, as if trying to soften the blow that was coming. "And we all understand that personal situations can affect us in different ways. I realize that recently, your personal life has taken a complicated turn." Emma looked away, unable to meet Paula's gaze directly. She knew her divorce had affected her performance, but hearing it from her supervisor made it all the more real. "The problem is that even understanding this, the company needs to move forward. In recent months, we've seen a significant drop in your productivity. Late reports, errors that would never have happened before. Emma, you've always been an excellent employee, but now we're faced with a situation we can no longer ignore." Emma felt a lump forming in her throat. Paula continued, but the words began to blur in her mind, like a distant buzzing. She knew what was coming. The email, the meeting request, Paula's expression, everything pointed to the same conclusion. "I'm very sorry, Emma, but the company has decided to terminate your contract. We will, of course, offer a fair severance package, and I can provide you with a letter of recommendation. But at this point, there's no longer room to continue with you here." Emma felt paralyzed. Paula's words echoed in the room like a hammer. She was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, disbelief, shame, and overwhelming sadness. Losing her job was the last thing she needed right now. She was already struggling with the devastation of her marriage, and now, without work, it felt like she had no pillars left to lean on. I know this is hard to hear, Paula continued, trying to be kind. And if there's anything we can do to facilitate this transition, please let me know. Emma took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. Tears threatened to spill, but she refused to cry in front of Paula. Not now. Not like this. Thank you, was all she managed to say, her voice almost inaudible. She stood up slowly, gathered her things, and left the room without looking back. The walk back to the hotel was a blur. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the walls of the world were closing in around her. Emma could barely process what had just happened. The separation had already taken so much from her, and now her job, the only remaining anchor that kept her life somewhat stable, had also been ripped away. She reached her hotel room and closed the door behind her, finally letting the tears flow. There was no one left to see, no one left to judge her pain. She sat on the bed, hugging herself, feeling the weight of unemployment added to the betrayal that still burned within her. Everything around her seemed to be crumbling, and Emma didn't know how to start over. She had already lost her marriage, her friendship, and now her career. Everything she had planned for her life was slipping away. And for the first time, she allowed herself to feel the depth of her loneliness. No matter how hard she tried, Emma couldn't see a way out of this situation. It felt as if, with every step she took, the ground opened up beneath her feet. What would she do now? The days that followed were a blur for Emma. She was trapped in a routine of apathy, unable to react to the avalanche of disasters that had befallen her life. After losing her job and leaving home, it felt as though all her certainties, all the anchors that kept her steady, had been ripped from her hands. She took refuge in her hotel room, which gradually began to feel like a prison, a place where the real world seemed distant, but the emptiness was constant. Ka's messages had stopped. Perhaps he had finally understood that there was no going back, or maybe he had simply given up trying. Scarlett also didn't reach out. Their silence was almost as painful as the betrayal, but it was also what Emma needed. Any attempt at reconciliation or explanation, at that point, would only make things worse. The end of her marriage and friendship was sealed, and she knew there was no fixing it. Each morning, Emma forced herself to get out of bed, but she couldn't find the energy to do more than the bare minimum. Food felt like a distant concern. The days blurred together, and the thought of leaving the room seemed like an unbearable task. The consequences of the betrayal had shattered something inside her that she wasn't sure she could repair. One morning, Emma's phone rang. She expected it to be another call from the hotel about extending her stay, or maybe a friend trying to offer comfort. However, when she answered, the voice on the other end was surprisingly familiar. "Emma? It's Clara." Clara was a co-worker, but one with whom Emma didn't have much intimacy. Still, her voice was friendly and concerned. "I heard that you left the company."
I'm so sorry, Emma. I've been thinking about you.
"How are you?" Emma felt a strange wave of emotions wash over her at Clara's simple question. She wanted to lie, to say she was fine, but in that moment, honesty felt like the only viable option. "I'm not okay, Clara. I lost everything." There was a brief silence on the line before Clara responded. "Emma, I don't know if this will help, but I wanted to tell you that there's an open position at a nearby advertising agency. I've heard good things about the place, and I thought of you. I know it might be too much right now, but if you ever want to try again, let me know. I can put in a good word for you." The unexpected offer left Emma speechless for a few moments. She could barely imagine going back to work at that moment, but the simple fact that someone still believed in her, when she herself couldn't, brought a small spark of something she almost didn't recognize anymore. Hope. "Thank you, Clara. I'll think about it." When she hung up, Emma sat on the bed, still processing the call. It felt as if someone had thrown her a lifeline while she was sinking. She was still at the bottom, but now there was a possibility, even if distant, of rising again. Clara's offer didn't erase everything that had happened, but it was a reminder that, somehow, there was a world outside that still functioned, and maybe she could find a place in it again. Emma began to consider what she would do next. She knew she couldn't stay in that room forever. The separation, the betrayal, and the loss of her job had devastated her, but she needed to find a way out of that cycle of pain. There had to be an exit, a path she still couldn't see, but which was there somewhere. 2 days later, Emma found herself back at her parents' house, something she had never planned for herself. They lived in a small town a few hours away, and they had always been a constant and supportive presence in her life. When they learned about her situation, they insisted she stay with them for a while. Although Emma initially resisted, deep down she knew she needed that support. She was too broken to face everything alone. Upon arriving, she was welcomed with tight hugs and worried looks, but no one forced difficult conversations. They allowed her to take her time, knowing she needed space. The days at home were quiet, filled with long walks through the gardens as she slowly tried to piece together her life. Emma spent hours on the porch, watching the wind sway the trees, trying to find some meaning in the chaos her life had become. She knew she couldn't stay there forever, but she also knew she wasn't ready to return to the world yet. There was still so much pain, so much hurt, and the future felt like an impenetrable fog. It was on one of those mornings, sitting alone in her parents' garden, that Emma had a conversation that would change her course. Her mother, always sensitive to Emma's emotional state, sat down next to her with a cup of tea in hand. The silence between them was comfortable, and they sat that way for a few minutes until her mother finally spoke. "You know, Emma, I see you here, suffering, trying to understand everything that happened. I understand it feels like the whole world has collapsed, but I also know you have an immense strength inside you." Emma looked at her mother, unable to respond immediately. She didn't feel strong. She felt like a broken version of herself, someone who didn't know how to move forward. "I know it's not easy," her mother continued gently, "but you will overcome this. It might take time, and it will hurt, but you will find a new path. It might not be the path you expected, but that doesn't mean it will be worse." Her mother's words resonated with Emma in an unexpected way. She knew there was truth in them, but it was still hard to believe. Even so, something inside her began to stir. Maybe it was the passage of time, maybe it was the unconditional support of her family, but slowly she started to realize that, despite everything, she was still here. There was still time to start over. Ka and Scarlett's betrayal had devastated her, but it hadn't completely destroyed her. Emma still existed, even if her former self was in pieces. Now, she needed to rebuild herself, and even if she didn't know how, a part of her was willing to try. In the days that followed, Emma began to take action. She decided to send a few emails, accepting Clara's invitation for a job interview. Although hesitant, she knew she couldn't stay still. She didn't want to be defined by what she had lost, but by what she could still build. Emma still didn't have all the answers. She still didn't know how to overcome the pain she carried, or how to move forward with her heart so hurt. But for the first time in weeks, she felt capable of taking a small step toward the future. Emma looked at herself in the mirror of her parents' room, adjusting her light blue blouse with trembling hands. It had been nearly 2 months since her life had completely collapsed, from Ka and Scarlett's betrayal to the end of her marriage and the loss of her job. Now, here she was, preparing for her first job interview in weeks. Clara's invitation to the advertising agency had emerged like a faint light in the darkness, and even with the fear and uncertainty of facing something new, Emma knew she needed to try. She couldn't continue living on the sidelines of her own life, buried in pain and suffering. As she stared at her reflection, she noticed she looked different. There was visible fatigue in her eyes, a mark of the difficult months she had endured. However, there was also something new, a quiet determination she didn't know where it came from, but it pushed her to keep going. Descending the stairs, she found her mother in the kitchen, smiling encouragingly. "You're going to do great, dear. No matter what happens today, know that we're all proud of you for trying." Emma smiled back, grateful for that unconditional support. She knew that if it weren't for her parents' patience and care, she would be in a much worse situation. Deep down, she still felt afraid of failing, of not being able to start over, but her mother's words helped her gather the courage she needed to face the day. The advertising agency's office was modern and welcoming, with glass walls and elegant furniture that seemed to invite creativity. Emma felt immediately out of place. It was as if she were stepping into a new world where everyone seemed to have their lives under control, while hers was still in pieces.
But she knew she had to take that step.
Upon arriving at the reception, a friendly young woman led her to a small meeting room, where Clara was already waiting with a warm smile. Emma took a deep breath, trying to relax. Clara greeted her warmly, and after a few minutes of light conversation, an elegant and confident woman entered the room. She introduced herself as Vanessa, the agency's creative director. Vanessa was professional, but there was something warm in the way she spoke. "So, Emma, I've heard great things about you. Clara mentioned that you have plenty of experience with media campaigns and account management. We're looking for someone with exactly that profile." Emma nodded, feeling the tension ease a little. Clara had been generous in recommending her skills, which made her feel somewhat more confident. The interview went smoothly, with Vanessa asking about Emma's previous experience and the types of campaigns she had managed. Emma answered as best as she could, but deep down, she was always waiting for Vanessa or Clara to ask about the last few months. She still felt marked by failure, by betrayal, and it seemed to shadow each of her words. But surprisingly, that question never came. At the end of the interview, Vanessa smiled encouragingly. "I really enjoyed talking with you, Emma. I think you would be a great addition to the team. Of course, we have other candidates to evaluate, but I hope we can work together." Emma left the room feeling a strange mix of relief and nervousness. She didn't know if she had gotten the job, but the simple fact of having gone through it, of allowing herself to try, was already a small victory. When she returned home, her parents were eager to know how it had gone. She smiled, more to reassure them than anything else. It went well. They were very nice. Now it's just a matter of waiting to see. In the following days, Emma felt more active. She began to go out for walks, something she hadn't done since everything happened. The fresh air and movement helped clear her mind, even though the painful memories still lingered. During one of those walks, she passed by a small cafe with tables set up on the sidewalk. She decided to stop there, not out of hunger or thirst, but from an impulse to do something different, something that would pull her out of the routine she had created for herself. She went in, ordered a coffee, and sat at one of the tables near the window, watching the street's activity. As she looked out distractedly, someone brushed lightly against her table, making the coffee tremble in the cup. Emma looked up to see a tall man with gentle features, who quickly apologized. "I'm sorry, I didn't see you there," he said with a friendly smile. "Is everything okay?" Emma nodded, still a bit surprised. "Yes, it was nothing." The man seemed to hesitate for a moment, as if deciding whether to continue the conversation or not. "Can I join you? The cafe is crowded today." Emma would usually refuse, especially in the last few months, when she avoided any social interaction beyond what was necessary. But at that moment, something compelled her to say, "Sure, why not?" The man introduced himself as Robert, and soon the conversation flowed naturally between them. He was a photographer, specializing in urban landscapes, and was passing through the city for a job. Robert's easy smile and laid-back demeanor made the conversation surprisingly light. For the first time in weeks, Emma found herself relaxing in the presence of another person. They talked for almost an hour, laughing about everyday situations and exchanging stories about their professional lives. Robert didn't ask anything personal, and Emma felt grateful for that. It was as if, for a moment, she could simply be Emma, without the weight of everything that had happened. When he finally got up to leave, he left a card on the table. "If you ever want to see some photos or grab another coffee, give me a call." Emma smiled, taking the card. "Maybe I will." As she watched Robert walk away, she felt something different inside her. It wasn't exactly joy, but a small spark of hope, a feeling that maybe the future wasn't as bleak as it seemed. That unexpected encounter with Robert brought a lightness that Emma hadn't felt in a long time. It was a reminder that life, as unpredictable and painful as it could also surprise her. Perhaps little by little, she was beginning to change course. And who knows, new opportunities, whether in work, friendship, or even happiness, might be waiting for her. The days following her encounter with Robert were marked by a mix of restlessness and a strange serenity. For the first time in a long while, Emma allowed herself to go out more frequently. Although she still felt the weight of betrayal and loss, the scars were beginning to heal, little by little. The wound still ached, but something inside her seemed to have awakened, a desire to live beyond the pain. And somehow, that casual conversation with Robert had planted the idea that the world wasn't as closed off as she had thought. One afternoon, while walking through the park near her parents' house, Emma's phone buzzed with a message. It was Clara from the agency. "Hi, Emma. I'm happy to let you know that you've been approved. Vanessa loved your experience and thinks you'll fit perfectly into the team. When can you start?" For a moment, Emma froze, her heart racing. She read the message multiple times, trying to process it. She had gotten the job. After weeks of uncertainty, finally a good piece of news, a chance to start over. She didn't expect such a wave of relief, but there she was, smiling to herself in the middle of the park. It felt as if, after so long sinking into pain, a first step out of the hole had been placed before her. Emma quickly replied to the message, arranging details to start the following week. The job, which had once seemed like an impossible burden, now represented an opportunity for her to rediscover herself. Feeling revitalized, Emma decided to stop by the cafe where she had met Robert again. It wasn't a place she had frequented before, but now it felt like a small refuge where things had a lightness she desperately needed. When she arrived, the place was busy, but luckily, a table in the back was empty. She sat down, ordered a coffee, and relaxed while watching the activity around her. As she was distracted with her phone, a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "Emma, you here again?" She looked up, surprised to see Robert standing beside her table, wearing the same friendly smile as before. "Robert, what a coincidence. It seems we have the same taste in cafes." He laughed and, without hesitation, asked, "Can I join you again?" Emma nodded, smiling. "Of course, have a seat." This time, the conversation flowed even more naturally. Robert was an excellent listener, and Emma found herself talking about her life with more openness than she had imagined. She didn't mention the betrayal right away, but eventually she shared about the separation and how her life had drastically changed in recent months. He listened attentively, without interrupting, just giving small signs of understanding with his head. "I'm so sorry for everything that happened to you," he said after a thoughtful silence. "It sounds like you went through hell. But honestly, I'm impressed that you're here, standing strong and starting over. That's already a huge victory." Emma smiled, feeling the sincerity in his words. "It hasn't been easy. And to be honest, I still don't know how I'm going to rebuild everything. But at least I got a new job. So maybe things are starting to look up." "I knew you could do it," Robert replied, his gaze encouraging. "Sometimes, when everything falls apart, it's an opportunity to build something new. And from what I see, you have so much to offer." That affirmation stirred something in Emma. For the first time in a long while, someone made her feel valued, seen, not as the betrayed woman or the person shattered by divorce and loss, but as someone who still had potential, who could rebuild. And that touched her in an unexpected way. The conversation shifted, and they began to talk about lighter topics. Robert shared more about his work as a photographer, how he traveled through cities capturing the beauty of urban landscapes. He shared little anecdotes from his travels, and Emma found herself laughing genuinely, something she hadn't done in months. It was as if, in his company, her scars became a little more bearable. As the cafe began to empty and the sun started to set, Robert looked at her with a more serious expression. "You know, I really enjoyed spending this time with you, Emma. There's something about you, a strength that inspires me, even if you don't realize it. I'd like to see you again if you're open to it." Emma paused for a moment, absorbing his words. She felt a mix of surprise and nervousness. After everything she had been through, the idea of opening up to another person, of trusting again, was daunting. But at the same time, Robert didn't seem to pose a risk. He was calm, honest, and there was no rush or exaggerated expectations, just someone wanting to get to know her better, and that alone made her consider the idea. "I really enjoyed your company too," she said finally. "Maybe we can grab another coffee, or perhaps do something different." Robert smiled, his eyes sparkling. "How about a walk around the city? I know some great spots you might like." Emma felt a wave of nervousness, mixed with excitement. Maybe it was time to set caution aside and allow something new into her life. "I'd love that," she replied, feeling for the first time that she was making a decision for herself, free from the weight of the past. That night, Emma returned to her parents' house with a lighter heart than she ever thought possible after everything she had experienced. As she climbed the stairs, Clara's message and her encounter with Robert echoed in her mind. It was strange to feel hope again, after believing her life was irreparably broken. The journey of healing was still far from over, and Emma knew that. There were still pains to confront, and certainly more tough days ahead. But for the first time, she felt it was possible to rise again. Possible to find happiness once more. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, Emma allowed herself to dream. Perhaps Robert was just the beginning of something new, a friendship, a connection, or maybe something more. She didn't know for sure. But for the first time in a long while, the future seemed to offer more than just pain. She closed her eyes, feeling grateful for that small, unexpected encounter that was subtly beginning to change her path. The days following Emma and Robert's reunion were unlike anything she had experienced in recent months. The unexpected lightness of their encounters brought a new color to her life, contrasting sharply with the pain that had shadowed her since the betrayal and the end of her marriage. Robert was a calming presence, free from pressure, and each meeting felt like a breath of fresh air. They began spending more time together, exploring the city, laughing at small things, and sharing life stories. Robert was discreet in asking about her past, and Emma appreciated that sensitivity. There were still deep wounds, but with him, for the first time, she felt she didn't have to carry them alone. Gradually, she began to trust more, sharing details about her divorce and how devastating it had been to discover Kaw's betrayal with Scarlett. Robert listened attentively, without judgment, offering the kind of support Emma didn't even know she needed. He also shared parts of his own story, disappointments, abandoned dreams, and how he found in photography a way to reconnect with himself after his own failures. One evening, they were sitting on a bench in a softly lit square, watching people pass by. The chilly autumn breeze stirred the dry leaves around them, creating a peaceful scene. Robert sat next to her, hands in his jacket pockets, while Emma gazed at the sky as if searching for answers among the stars. "You know," Robert began, breaking the silence softly, "I used to think that after a certain point, things couldn't really change. Like life had put you on a dead-end road, and the best you could do was learn to live with it." Emma turned to him, curious. "What made you change your mind?" Robert gave a sideways smile, as if the answer were obvious. "You?" Emma felt her heart race, surprised. He continued, "You've been through so much, Emma. More than many people could bear, and yet you're here, seeking a way to start over. That inspires me. You've shown me that even when everything falls apart, there's still a way to find something new. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to be by your side if you'll allow it." The weight of those words was both gentle and profound. Emma felt a mix of emotions, gratitude, affection, fear, everything blending together. There was something about Robert, something safe and kind, that made her feel cared for in a way she hadn't experienced in a long time. She knew she was starting to fall for him, but the idea of a new love still frightened her. Her heart was full of scars, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to open up again. But in that moment, looking into Robert's sincere eyes, she felt that maybe, just maybe, it was possible. "I don't know what to say," Emma confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm scared. Scared of getting hurt again. Scared of not being able to trust completely." Robert gently took her hand, not rushing her. "I understand. I'm not asking for haste or promises. I just want to be here, with you. We can take it slow, as long as it takes. The important thing is that you know I'm willing to try." Emma felt tears well up in her eyes, but this time, they were tears of emotion, not sadness. For the first time in a long while, She felt she could trust someone, that there was room for something new to grow. A new relationship built on respect and understanding. "I want to try too," Emma finally replied, squeezing his hand gently. "I don't know how it will be, but I want to find out." Robert smiled, his gaze warm and inviting, as if he understood everything Emma was trying to convey, even without words. They remained there for a few more minutes in silence, watching the city's movement around them, feeling completely connected. That moment marked the beginning of something new, something Emma hadn't expected, but was now willing to accept. The following weeks were a roller coaster of new emotions for Emma. She and Robert started spending more time together, exploring what felt like the start of a solid and genuine relationship. Unlike anything she had experienced before, there were no pressures or unrealistic expectations. They met whenever they could, talking for hours about everything, and time flew by without her noticing. Emma had also started her new job at the advertising agency. The work was demanding, but it was a kind of challenge that kept her busy, helping her rebuild her confidence. The team was welcoming, and Clara proved to be a great ally in the adaptation process. One day, while reviewing a project at the office, Emma felt a slight dizziness. She paused for a moment, believing it might just be fatigue, but the discomfort persisted throughout the week. At first, she didn't pay much attention, but when she started feeling nauseous in the mornings, something inside her lit up a warning signal. Could it be? A mix of fear and hope filled her as she decided to take a pregnancy test. The positive result appeared quickly, and Emma stood still for a few moments, staring at the small display, her heart racing. Pregnant. She was pregnant. The news caught her off guard, but at the same time, something inside Emma ignited even more. After everything she had been through, life was presenting her with something completely new, the possibility of becoming a mother. Later that night, when she met Robert, she knew she had to tell him the truth. They were sitting in a small, cozy restaurant, and Emma could hardly focus on the food. Robert noticed her nervousness and asked gently, "Is everything okay?" Emma took a deep breath, holding his hands for a moment before speaking. "Robert, I found out something today, and I don't know how you're going to react, but I need to tell you." He leaned slightly forward, concerned. "What is it?" I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was almost palpable. Emma watched as Robert processed the information, his eyes widening slightly in surprise. She braced for any reaction, from shock to apprehension. But to her surprise, his smile was the first response. "Pregnant," he repeated, as if trying to fully grasp it. Then, with a growing joy in his eyes, he squeezed her hands tighter. "That's amazing, Emma." She blinked, incredulous. "You think so?" "Of course I do," Robert replied, laughing softly. "It's not something I expected, but the idea of creating a new life with you feels like the best surprise we could have." Emma felt tears streaming down her face, but this time they were tears of relief and happiness. Robert's support and acceptance touched her deeply. For the first time, the future seemed promising, filled with new possibilities, not just of love, but of family. The pain of the past, the scars she still carried, all seemed smaller in light of what was beginning to blossom between them. They were ready for this new chapter, and Emma, for the first time in a long while, felt her life was heading toward a happy ending. If you liked this story, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video, and until the next story.